and I thought it was done. I didn't think we were going to make it through the night, and I was pretty beat up and hurting. So it sounds not too heroic, I just really laid down on the ice and looked up and said, God, if you're going to get me through this night, it's in your hands.
After a 3,000-foot slide down Mexico's tallest mountain, Matt Miller found himself trapped and dying at 14,000 feet and 30 degrees below zero. 20 surgeries and multiple amputations awaited him, yet neither they nor the mountain would be his biggest battle. He's our guest on this episode of Silverladder.
You're listening to Silverladder, a podcast built on real-life, inspiring stories of those who have faced and overcome challenges related to mental health, addiction and recovery, grief, parenting, and much more. Real, raw, relatable. Silverladder.
Welcome to Silverladder. I'm Shane Watson, mental health educator and consultant. Before we meet today's guest, it's important to note the Silverladder podcast may contain mature content, including explicit language and references to topics such as drug use, suicide, or violence. This show is intended for adults only. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by guests of the show are their own and not necessarily the views of the host. Sharing them does not constitute an endorsement by the Silverladder Podcast or Silverladder LLC. Likewise, nothing shared on the show is intended to replace professional advice. As always, consult your physician, attorney, licensed counselor, and local record store owner before making any personal changes or decisions. Our guest today is Matt Miller. Matt is an athlete, an outdoorsman, a business owner, an individual in long-term recovery, and a person with an incredible story of survival and overcoming the odds. Matt, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Shane. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
I interviewed you for a previous podcast I did. A little backstory for those listening. About 5 years ago. So it was 2020, April 2020.
Just before COVID.
Exactly. As it was just starting to get into full swing.
Yeah.
And I interviewed you, and your story, as those listening will hear, is a powerful story. But our interview was done over the phone, and if I recall correctly, you were up in northern Arizona in the mountains somewhere.
Okay.
And the connection was not good. And I'm thinking of all the stories to have this weak phone connection. Like this, why is this the one? So I knew that when we started this podcast, the Silverladder Podcast, there was nobody else I wanted to have for the first guest.
Thank you.
So that we can finally do your story justice and people can hear you much more clearly.
Thank you. Let's do it. Better connection today. Absolutely.
How does your story begin? What was your childhood like? And what did your dreams look like? What did you see yourself doing in the future?
Man, that's a loaded question. I grew up, really, I call it like the Leave It to Beaver childhood. Wonderful family. My parents both, worked, just a great family. I had an older sister, and sports and athletics had always come real easily to me. My nickname growing up was Sports Miller. And, but I was a kid that I think I was a very grateful kid. I understood what I had and where my lot was. And I think because of my involvement in sports, it introduced me to walks of all life,
Definitely.
Kids from all over town. And I always really appreciated that. I loved meeting people from different neighborhoods, different areas, different walks. And through that process, I think it kind of helped me realize how fortunate I was to grow up in Arcadia, where I grew up, and with the family I did, and some of the skills and talents I had, which, like you mentioned, I was decent at sports. And so what were my dreams? I don't know if I can really I don't even know if I can answer that now. I'm still trying to figure that all out.
Same boat.
I do know this, that since I was a young man and even today, what gets me going is helping people. I'm in the investment business, and we'll talk about someone's portfolio, and it just after you've been through life experiences like you and I have, and you've had your freedom taken away from addiction, it just changes a lot of the angle you take on conversation and what's really important. And so I'm in the investment business, but I'm really in the people business, you know, and it's, so that's my avenue currently of, you know, putting money on the table and paying the bills, so to speak. But, I'm still dreaming and still trying to figure out ways to, you know, you share your story, Shane, like what you're doing. You're my hero. Like, it's incredible to do stuff like that and dedicate your life to other men. So props to you. So.
Wow. Thank you. I mean, that's a humbling statement when they're going to hear what your story sounds like, to have that coming from someone like you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And I'm still dreaming too. You know, the day that we stop dreaming, we're in danger. You know, the day that we lose that thing that we're dreaming about, that's a scary place to be.
Yeah.
So you mentioned sports being an important part of your life. In high school, athletics became an even bigger part of your life. What sports did you play? And what did you like about them, or sports in general? Now, you already mentioned one thing you liked about sports is you meet people from all walks of life and you get to connect with them, you bond with them, you're a team. So what sports did you play, and what was it that you appreciated about them?
So at Brophy, I went to Brophy High School, and I played football, baseball, and basketball. And I actually had an accident my freshman year that involved my hands that had a lot to do with kind of my sports trajectory. I had a great freshman. I think I set the touchdown record for freshman year. But I was running. I think the Arizona Republic did a special on our line. We had like 300-pound guys on our line as freshmen. So I was running through these huge holes. So it wasn't me, but had a great football season. And that kind of seemed to be where my direction was going. And I was really into outdoors and fishing. We rolled a car I'll make a long story short, on a fishing trip that summer. And my hand got pinched outside the roof. I don't know if you know this story. And what they call it, degloved, and got pinched between the roof and the ground. And I remember bringing my hand in after we rolled up, and there's literally just nothing there but just bone in the tendon.
Wow. And
that was the first time they told me you'd never use your hand again. But ironically, it was because of that I became a good baseball player. I got halfway through the basketball season. I couldn't make a fist. My hands were still bothering me. And so I turned to baseball, and ended up being what worked for me. And I went on to play at Santa Clara University to play baseball. So I kind of lost my train of thought there, but I wanted to share that story. The Lord's been after my hand for a long time. We always joke. But that was the first time that, you know, I had adversity, and that adversity introduced me to a part of me that I didn't know existed. Up to that point in my life, everything had come so easy. And for the first time to be told, no, this isn't, you know, and your life's going to be different because of this incident. It had a huge effect on me. And I think that gratitude was even multiplied more so through that experience. But,
you proved it to yourself. It gave you the opportunity to prove to yourself very early on, this is not going to stop me.
Yeah. And it proved to me that, yeah, exactly. That if you have a plan and you can put out this plan, and that's what I did. I had this plan that if I worked on baseball, I went in the batting cages for 2 hours a day, and I did this in the gym twice a week, and I just stuck to this routine. It showed me that what's on the other side. And so it was really instrumental in helping me kind of develop as a human, and just getting stuff done and realizing there's a lot more in our grip, you know, than we like to think. And so it was actually confidence building. Yeah.
You partially answered the question I'm about to ask when you said, I came up with a plan. When something goes wrong, when life sends us a challenge or a defeat, I always ask people who go through things like that, like the degloving at that young of an age, and people who do manage to overcome those things and let those things not destroy them. I always ask, what was it that allowed you to overcome that? Part of the answer is you said, I formed a plan. You sat down and you figured out, okay, what am I able to do right now?
Yeah.
What can I move forward with? What else was it in you that at that young of an age allowed you to not just sit there and wallow in defeat? Is it something someone taught you? Is it innate? What was that?
You get one shot at this world, and I have this innate love for life of just, whether it's this, you know, talking to people and hearing their story, or getting better at something or failing at something. All of that is so beautiful. Like I just, even though I've been through all this, I'm so amazed that I get to do this here in Phoenix, Arizona. And, that's what it was, to be honest. It's just a love for life.
You said something so important that I want to highlight for
Sure.
the parents out there. You said failing at something.
Yeah,
It is important for our kids to fail at some things.
absolutely.
Life is not always going to let us be the winner or the champion or succeed or have things work out. You might not get that job. You might not have that relationship with that person you've got that crush on. That's the reality of it. But it is, what do we then do in response to that?
Yeah.
And you talked about it's your love of life, and you talked about it early on when I asked you about your childhood. Your gratitude. I keep hearing gratitude in all of this. And I think it's so important for us to keep that as a focal point in our lives, whether we're struggling with the injury that you had to your hand as a freshman or something else that's not going wrong. So I love that you pointed out that like failure is a part of the process.
I call it, I kind of made up a term. I call it GRITitude. It's
Love
a
it.
combination
Yes.
of grit and gratitude. And when you have this just grateful love for life, grit becomes easy. It's easy to dust yourself up and get back up and give it another shot. And I think part of it too is just through the people I've met through my injuries. You meet people who you should have on the show way before me, who are incredible human beings. And
Introduce me to them, by the way.
I will. And so yeah, it's been a labor of love, of pain, but a labor of love. And I couldn't agree with you more. This whole not failing, it's something I see a lot. I just inherited 2 children. I'm getting married, and I'm inheriting a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, which is the most beautiful thing. But I really see it with kids these days. It's just the lack of failure and this fear of failure. And so grateful that we grew up in a world where
That wasn't bubble wrapped.
and maybe that's why I like baseball too, is you fail 70% of the time and you're an all-star, and so many good lessons come from sports.
And that's something that when I look at my own recovery story and I look at when I started drinking and using and when that wormed its way into my life, it involved me starting to give up the positive things that had occupied my time, and sports was one of those things. Speaking of sports, did you continue to play sports in college? You mentioned you went to Santa Clara. Did you continue to play sports, and what did you go to Santa Clara for? What was your major?
I was a finance major, but I wish I had it all together. I was going for the experience, and that's what you did. I thought you went to college, and I wanted to go, unfortunately, drink beer and hang out with friends. And I thought that was kind of what college was for. And so I don't know if I had a real, big purpose going there, wanting to be a finance major. My father had an investment firm, and so I kind of grew up in that industry, but I was still feeling it out. It was really just about, that's what the next step was in life. I thought, the next part of my development was college.
I kind of approached it in the same way. It was like a given that I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing journalism, which I look back now, if I had it to do over again, doing what I do, I would have gone into psychology or social work or counseling or something like that. But I get what you're saying, where it's just like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah.
And not having that fire lit under us or having that direction that I really want this thing for my future, it lends itself to I'm going to just drink a bunch of beer.
Right.
Because that's another thing where it's like, especially in the college mindset, well, I'm supposed to do this. I'm a college student. The ones that I've noticed in high school and college, people I grew up with or young people that I've met today who don't fall into those traps are the ones that have this thing, this concrete, like, I want this thing so bad, and I'm not going to let anything get in my way, including myself.
Right.
So did you find yourself in that field of finance post-college, or did you end up heading elsewhere?
I did. I came back here and started working on my CFP, which is your Certified Financial Planning degree, and I was working at my father's firm, but I was still very, very much feeling it out. There's a lot of things in the investment business and the finance industry I'm not real fond of, and unfortunately, some of that is, the products that we sell are products, and we're trying to sell, and so you still see people getting taken advantage of. But back to kind of what I started with is, I'm in the finance world, but I'm in the people business, and I don't have I don't have people with investment problems. I always joke I have investments with people problems, and that's really the truth. And the human element is the part I love, the relationships.
And you I love your approach to that, because I've said this to so many people before in videos I've posted and things I've said elsewhere. We don't have to be in the mental or behavioral health field to make a huge difference in someone's life, potentially mentally, emotionally, spiritually, etc. Because often it's a conversation that someone has with a person that makes them feel seen or heard or understood. It could be somebody they run into in the grocery store. It could be a bank teller. You have a platform that a lot of people may not look at your platform and say, this is a platform where you can potentially, change people's lives emotionally, mentally, etc.
Yeah.
But if you approach all of life as this is a way where I'm connecting with people, you can be a janitor, and maybe you're a high school janitor and you're the first person that asks a struggling kid, are you okay? Because I've noticed
just a means.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Shane, it's ironic this happened to my hands, but it's been one of the best blessings with it is when I shake someone's hand, it forces me to be vulnerable. They see my scars and someone will ask, hey, what happened? And I might not tell the whole story, but I mentioned I lost my fingers to frostbite and had this incident. But what happens is it just opens this door to people think they can share with me their scars and their story. And you're exactly right. We may be talking about rebalancing your 401k, but it lends to a totally different discussion about what's going on at home or in their personal life. And so the hands have been such a blessing for me, just from opening doors and having my scars on the outside, so for all to see.
I want everyone listening to hear this. Two things out of all this that you've just said. One, the things that we may see as a fault or a flaw or a challenge in ourselves could be the very thing that shows other people who may be struggling there's an open door. And I can talk to this person. I can open up to this person. As soon as I got candid and transparent years ago about my recovery, what my past was like, I have people literally every single day saying, I've never talked to anybody about this. Can I talk to you about this? And I'm like, of course, let's do that. Yeah. And then the other thing, the second thing I want to highlight is, once again, back to the fact, you don't have to have doctor in front of your name or PhD after your name to be the person that makes a tremendous difference in someone's life. So you mentioned your hands. Let's talk about that story. In 2002, things changed for you on a mountain climbing trip with your dad. Take us to those moments. Put us in those moments. What was the trip like? How was it supposed to go? And what ended up happening?
So my father has been my best friend since a young age, and we had lived in the outdoors. We've done week-long trips in Alaska, all kinds of things that probably had hairy moments. He had gotten into climbing while I was away at college and asked if I wanted to go climb this usually relatively safe mountain called Pico de Orizaba outside Mexico City. It's a 19,000-foot volcano. It's actually the third highest mountain in all the Americas, and a lot of people go there just because of its proximity and for training for Everest. It's such a great way to get that kind of altitude so close to the States. And it's a glacier from 14,000 feet to 18,000 feet. So about 4,000 feet, if you can just envision like an ice skating ring that's kind of at an angle here on the face of a mountain. And usually they have a really good snowfall that falls on top of that ice. And the year we were there, they just had a really poor monsoon season, and it was like an ice skating ring. And so to take you there, I remember we stayed the night at 14,000 feet in a little hut. There's a lot of foreign languages speaking around me. There's people from all over the world there to climb. And I remember sleeping that night. It was a full moon, or close to a full moon, and the light ricocheting off this ice and just almost making it like daylight outside at 2-3 in the morning, and the mountain just staring at me. And I remember looking at that all night. And I had a bad feeling. I think we look back in retrospect, a lot of us who were in that hut that day had a bad feeling about just the conditions. And, to make a long story short, we got going at about 2 in the morning, started the climb, got to the Jampa Glacier at about daylight, and, bent down to put on my crampons, which are those, your spikes. And little did I know that would be the last time I would tie my shoes with my fingers. And I can remember it very vividly. And we began our hike though. And my father, about 2,000 meters into the climb, so about 2 hours into it, he started suffering with altitude sickness and moving really slowly. And I stayed back with him while the rest of our group had summited. So we were a couple hundred yards underneath the summit. Our group had just gone over the top. And my dad slipped and fell. And he was right in front of me. And I could fall to my knees and kind of like a hockey goalie stop him here. And luckily he hadn't gotten going fast enough so I was able to stop him. And we dug a little hole out in the glacier there and had a father-son conversation about, what are we going to do? And the decision was, it always works out. Let's go for it. We're so close. Let's go for it. It always works out. And, cause it always does, it's always those people. I'm never one of those people. And, it seems like we always make it through. And, he stood up, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw his legs kick out from underneath him, and he fainted. And I dove for him. I remember grabbing the right part of his jacket, and I was going to try to, what they call self-arrest. You get on top of your ice axe and you dig it into the ice and self-arrest. But when I did that, the ice axe hit a rock and came up here and just knocked me out right here. And
wow.
That was
right
the last
in the forehead?
Thing. Yeah, you can see right here. Just missed my temple. I got really fortunate. And that was really the last thing I remember until, this is hard to believe, we fell a little over 4,000 feet, tumbling down the face of this glacier before we got tangled. Something caused us to stop. That week, 13 others fell in that same place we did, and all of them went off. So for somehow...
And ended up dying.
That ended up dying. Okay. And somehow we stopped and just short of these cliffs. So anyhow, here I am banged up. My father's leg, he had a compound fracture. His bone was sticking out of his skin, but he's laying about 15 feet away from me. And the worst part about Shane was I was blind just from all the trauma. It had made my head about the size of a basketball. And so my eyes were swollen shut. And so that was the first time, I remember I took my gloves off to peel my eyes open to try to see my dad. I could tell he was close. I could tell he was near. And never heard my dad swear, and it was the first time I've ever heard him use the F word. And that's when I knew it was pretty serious. And to make a long story short, we had to spend the night there, and probably got negative degrees for 12 hours or so. And in the middle of the night, I got pulmonary edema, which makes you feel warm. And so I started taking my clothes off, which is not the thing you want to do at 18,000 feet, and got frostbite. And somehow we miraculously made it through the night. And there happened to be someone on the mountain who had a connection with the U.S. Embassy and had made a call. And I grew up going to, I mentioned I went to Brophy, and one of my best friends is a guy by the name of Joe Harper. And the Harpers shared a cabin with the McCains up in Sedona. And so through that relationship, and
you're referring to John McCain's family?
John McCain,
okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And somehow John found out about it, and they sent down this military helicopter and rescued us first thing in the morning and picked us off the mountain. I remember in this little basket. It's quite a rescue at 14,000 feet for a helicopter to get that high. And then they dropped me off at a little village, and that was the beginning of 2 years of hell, really, to be honest. That was probably the easiest night of the next 2 years of just surgeries and infections and, unknown.
How long were you stuck there on the side of the mountain before they could get to you?
Probably about 18 to 20 hours.
Wow. Okay. Put us back in that moment. Did you have a conversation with your dad? I mean, you obviously were fairly close. You said, I think about 15 yards away from each other. Did you have a conversation, and what was that conversation like? What do you think? What do you say in those moments?
Yeah, it's not as heroic as it sounds. I was pretty out of it mentally. But I do remember a Mexican group came up to tend to us until it got dark, and they're trying to get a helicopter to us that day. And while the Mexican rescue group was with us, they were putting blankets on us and trying to keep us warm and whatnot. But when the helicopter couldn't get high enough that night, and they told us we were going to have to spend the night, they just patted me on the chest, I'll never forget, and said, God bless, and recommended I say something to my father. And I didn't really understand what that meant. Like, why are they recommending I say something to my father? And that was really when I saw I realized the severity of the moment. They were nervous about us making it through the night. And that's when I peeled off my gloves to peel my eyes open like this to see my dad. And we talked this was the only part of the night I really remember, briefly. And I wanted him to know that this wasn't his fault. Like, he's just a incredible father that was doing what I think every father would want to do with their son. And we had some things go wrong, and I loved him. And we kind of joked, and I said, I'll see you in the morning. And I put my hands like this behind my head and just laid back down on the ice. And I look back now, I mean, I was pretty tired, and I thought it was done. I didn't think we were going to make it through the night. And I was pretty beat up and hurting. So it sounds not too heroic. I just really laid down on the ice and looked up and said, God, if you're going to get me through this night, it's in your hands. And that was the last thing I really remember of the night. The night was full of dreams and kind of hallucinations, and which incidentally was another tough part of that was they were nervous about us getting up in the middle of the night and trying to walk off. So they took what was left of our ice axe and drilled us to the glacier, which I think from a traumatic experience from my dad's standpoint was probably one of the most difficult things, because you can imagine seeing your son 15 feet away, taking his clothes off in the middle of the night, and he can't get over there to help me. He just has to watch me. And so I think that was a really tough thing for him. But miraculously, we made it through the morning, and that was the start of the journey.
That was just the beginning.
Yeah, just the beginning.
So speaking of just the beginning, as a result of that, you ended up needing to have multiple surgeries. How many surgeries did you have as a result of that, and what needed to be done? Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of frostbite specialists in Scottsdale, Arizona, right? But what we learned is there's really not a lot of frostbite specialists anywhere. Frostbite is really, you're losing your vascularity to your muscles. So your muscles just start dying. You're not getting blood flow to the area?
Okay. Correct. It's just a burn. And so there wasn't a lot of help here. People didn't have much advice for us. We called a couple, we called Switzerland, a couple of big climbing communities, and we're trying to talk to people and figure out what was going on. And the plan was just to hang out. We'd go down to the burn unit here, and they would just look for, there was a line of demarcation where my fingers were turning black, and you could see what was live and what was dead. And they were just keeping an eye on that. And they're using the term auto amputate. They wanted to just keep an eye on things, keep the eye on the infection, and let it auto amputate, which is a horrible month to just go through this month of every morning waking up, not knowing, is a finger going to be in the bed? Is it going to be laying there? And it was tough. And Christmas came around. Sorry, I'm kind of rambling here on stories, but Christmas came around, and the accident happened November 22nd. So it was about a month after that. I couldn't open my presents. And, the writing was on the wall. I think we were all in denial. Like, my fingers were black. They needed to be cut off. We were living in this world of it's going to grow back. And it was clear it wasn't. And so I couldn't get these packages open. And amazingly, the phone rings on Christmas Day. And my father had this investment business, had a client in Dallas, only one client in Dallas. And it was this client. He said, hey, Dennis, my neighbor, we heard about your accident, and Matt, we want to tell you, you're in our thoughts. But my neighbor is this guy named Beck Weathers. And I don't know if you know who Beck is, but Beck, there's a famous incident on Everest in 96, and they just did a movie on it called Everest, and Josh Brolin played Beck. Beck was a pathologist from Dallas who got into climbing. I was having a tough marriage and went there looking for answers, and has this unbelievable story of survival, and made it through, but ended up doing this pretty radical procedure on his hands to save some of his thumb. And I remember leaving for the climb. I don't know if I told you this. I was leaving for the climb. Someone I work with yelled, "Matt, don't become the next Beck Weathers." And I remember Googling Beck on the way to the airport, looking at his hands and just thinking, I don't know if I could live like that. And here I am, to make a long story short, I'm on my way to Dallas. I do all my surgeries with Beck's surgery, and I'm literally becoming the next Beck Weathers. And so that was our frostbite kind of specialist, if you will. So I did all my surgeries in Dallas. The each hand took about 12 hours. One was 12, one was 13. And those were the big ones. But I probably went back for, I'm guessing, 20 surgeries. They took my latissimus out of my back and put that over my my fingers, or where my fingers were. In the medical world, it's called like a pre-flap. And basically what they do that for is it provides oxygen. They can get oxygen back to those bones and try to save some stuff. But this was, as before it had atrophied, was really big. And so for the first couple months, as this atrophied down, bones would pop out. And so I would have to go back to Dallas repeatedly, and they'd kind of shiver this bone down and then close up the wound.
Was specifically in the left hand, or was this both?
This was just the left hand that I was having those issues. Yeah. And so those were really tough times going back by myself to Dallas. I didn't want it was just a demoralizing thing for the whole family to go see, to be part of that whole experience. But, so numerous surgeries. And then I think the last big thing was, to get my toes auto amputated or cut off. I got staph infection that last surgery, and, had a PICC line put in me for about a year. And, so I don't know if you know much about a PICC line, but basically it's every day, every morning I'd wake up and get plugged into antibiotics, go to work, come back, and it's just a permanent PICC line. It goes right here into your vena cava. So it's just permanent. So you could it's for people who need to get, antibiotics pretty routinely. And that was at the tail end. So those were the big ones.
So you said closer to 20 surgeries.
Yeah.
Wow. So beyond the physical, did this event and the subsequent events, the surgeries, the, unable to open presents at Christmas, did this change you as a person? Did it impact how you viewed yourself? If so, how?
Yes and no. For one, it was just survival. I was just trying to survive, but it absolutely did. I was not I don't want to say like a cocky kid, but I was very self-confident. I don't think I had a lot of insecurities. And overnight, I became the most insecure kid in the room. For the next 5 years, I bet you the next 10 years after the accident, I don't think I walked into a room and my first thought, I couldn't just be myself. My first thought is these people are wondering what the heck happened to this freak. So I became really self-absorbed in a negative way, and very insecure, and really lost my confidence.
Now, you said for about 10 years, I couldn't walk into a room and be myself. When did that start to change? Was it just the passage of time and you just accepted it, you got used to it, or was there something or some things, plural, that allowed you to regain your confidence and see yourself as yourself?
Great question. It probably wasn't 10 years. It was probably up to like 5 years ago. I mean, that's how, if I'm being dead honest, It's been that big of a life-changing thing. There's been a lot. I got into running, as you know. I signed up a couple weeks after I had my toes amputated. I signed up for the Rock and Roll Half Marathon, and knowing I probably couldn't run at all, but it would be good for me to get outside and just do something. And I hated running. Running, like in college, running was for people who were too uncoordinated to do anything else, and that's what you're stuck with. But when I did this, I found my relationship with God again. I found my quiet time, and I just started to get confidence that I could, do these things. I could accomplish stuff again, and I started to see a new identity. But it just took time, Shane. It took time of seeing. I never knew if a girl would like me again, and having the first girl like me was a little bit of a confidence booster.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, maybe. And so it was just little chip away like that before I felt whole. And you throw drugs in that mix, whether it's, the pain meds or I got into marijuana, whatever I could find to escape there for a little bit. Obviously that delays the recovery and, psychologically, mentally. Yeah. It's kind of like just punning, but that's what I was doing to survive.
So let me ask you about that. After the surgeries, you were prescribed pain medication. What happened as a result of taking the pain medication? What did that, because I know this opened a whole other challenge for you. Was it gradual or rapid? How did that go? What did that look like?
All those insecurities I'm talking about, I took a pill.
It masks them.
It was gone immediately, and I was Matt of old. And I think that was part of my problem was I would take these pills because I wanted to be Matt of old. I wanted to be the old Matt. And when I took these pills, I could psychologically go there. And it wasn't until I got all of that out of the system and started dealing with reality that I started to see this new Matt. And then that took time to fall in love with and realize it was the same Matt, just a little different. But yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Did you end up getting addicted to the painkillers?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I was addicted from the first one. I probably had this addiction before the accident happened. I'll be honest. Growing up in Phoenix, I don't know if this was your world at all, but a lot of my friends would get on the Rocky Point and we'd come back with somas and all these little things. And my addiction may have started there a little bit to realize I could take these things and get a head change. But it also came from sports and GNC. I used to go to GNC and get, people will laugh, but it's like the gateway drug. They're called Rip Fuel. Do you remember them?
Absolutely.
They're little ephedra pills. And I could take those and work out for 12 hours a day and, not eat. And that was probably my first foray into taking something that was really performance enhancing, of trying to get an edge and trying to, whether it's mask a feeling I'm experiencing or just be a little bit better. And I think that's where it really started. And then you have an accident and wake up like this and it's thrown in your face. It's go time. It was like easy peasy for me to, here's where I'm going to run and hide for sure.
Between the accident, the surgeries, the physical changes, the addiction, between all of that, what was the biggest battle you fought? What was your biggest challenge out of all of this? Was it recovering from the surgeries, or was it getting through the addiction and leaving the opioids behind?
Leaving my fingers and my toes, looking in the mirror and seeing a totally different person. None of that's even on the radar compared to getting through addiction.
Wow.
For me, addiction's the hardest. I feel like I'm a really good person. I have good intentions. I'm a good human being. I can't tell you how many times I would pull up to a Walgreens crying, wanting to go right, but I'd get that buzz, earlier in the day that my refill's ready, and I would go left, and repeatedly, over and over and over. And that was the hardest thing for me is, people look at addicts as some moral, it's a morality thing, and
it's a health issue.
I sure thought that originally until I was that guy. And then I quickly learned it has nothing to do with morality. It's, that may get questioned along the way with your thinking. But for me, it was a health issue. I did not know how to deal with what I was going through. And furthermore, at that point, I didn't feel like I talked to people about that stuff either. I was probably wasn't at a place where I am now with my vulnerability and my openness about what I'm feeling. And that probably didn't help things either.
And we're doing this episode as part of Men's Mental Health Month. June is Men's Mental Health Month. And, I have another guest that I'm going to be speaking with. He'll be in the second episode, Parker Ellison. And we talked about, and you just hit on it right now, it's hard for people in general to speak up and ask for help and to say what they're going through. It is often even harder as a man because you're not supposed to show any weaknesses or any flaws. Right. You're not supposed to acknowledge that you're feeling something or you're struggling or you're depressed or whatever. What was it that allowed you to get past that and be vulnerable? Obviously, the passage of time is the answer to a lot of these things.
Yeah.
In addition to that, what allowed you to be vulnerable? Because right now, with the vulnerability you have in sharing this story, it's power. That vulnerability is power. There's going to be people that hear this episode who are probably in the midst of what you were going through, whether it's a physical challenge or whether it's addiction, who are hearing this and saying, I can do this, or maybe I can do this. And you've given them that hope. When did you start to feel like you could speak up? And what led to that?
I think it was the vulnerability of other people that had come into my life. There was a young man named Quinn Simons who was he was my idol going through all this. Quinn had my surgeries, was stuck on a mountain just next to Everest with his father, and was so frostbitten he couldn't unzip his pants and started urinating in his pants, and it froze off his legs. And he walked for 6 days on frozen legs. And so he lost his legs. His hands were probably more beat up than mine. And the doctor, Dr. Greg Anigan, who did all our surgeries, called Quinn when I was going into surgery and said, hey, this guy wants to talk to you. He just had this accident where he's thinking about doing your surgery, Quinn. And he got Quinn's voicemail. Quinn was in the Bahamas fly fishing. I woke up from that surgery and Quinn was in my hotel room. He flew back from the Bahamas to be there with me. And Quinn was he was a dude's dude. This guy's from Santa Fe. He very opposite of me with his hands. I mean, like everyone in the room would know he had this accident and he was damn proud of his hands. I remember there was a rattlesnake crossing the street the first time we went out to see him. He got out of the car and picked up this snake with his bare hand and walks it off. And so he was like, just Raiders of the Lost Ark to me. But to see him, this masculine man, who also married his sweetheart, his high school sweetheart, to see her and her love for him and look past that and just the vulnerability of it all gave me the opening of like, it was okay to share all this stuff, and as soon as I started talking to people about my issues, I started to hear about theirs. You don't feel so alone. And that was really the start of it. Ironically, it was the addiction in the recovery rooms that saved my life, of hearing other people's problems.
And that's why we're doing this show, because
Amen.
if we talk about it and we show that it's okay to talk about this, it will allow people who are like you, who are stuck in that feeling like, oh man, can I speak up?
Absolutely.
Letting them know, not only can you, I encourage you, I will sit down and I will listen to you without judgment and with empathy.
100%. Like that comes to the whole brings me to the asking for help topic. Like men are so afraid to ask for help. And can I tell a quick story about asking?
Absolutely. That's why we're here.
We were in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was my first business trip. And this was at the height of my insecurities of my hands. And I had to wear a suit for work. So you can imagine I have to get creative with buttoning tools. So I found in this geriatric magazine a button tool that I could buy. And so I'm in Grand Rapids getting ready for my meeting. And I know before I went on the trip, I put one of these, I bought those button tools and I put them in every suitcase, like numerous ones. I can't imagine showing up to a meeting and not having those. And how would I get dressed? Well, that's exactly what happened. I wake up, I can't find this button tool. The meeting's getting closer. I'm getting dressed in my hotel room, but my shirt's unbuttoned. I'm trying to figure out like, how am I going to button my shirt? And it was the first time I asked for help. I poked my head out in the hotel room and looked to the right, looked to the left. And here was this big Jamaican woman with a big cart, and she was pushing, and I didn't know what to say. And I kind of put my head out there nervously. And I said, listen, I had this accident. I showed her my hands and my shirt's unbuttoned. Could you come over here and help me? And it was this awkward silence. And you know what happened? She's, oh my gosh, she ran over and just loved on me.
That's
and
amazing.
Buttoned my shirt, told me her whole story, how she got here and her family from Jamaica. And I felt probably like more human than I've ever felt in my life in that moment. And then I get teared up thinking about it. But what I learned is I asked for help, and I always thought I'd ask for help and you'd feel weaker afterwards. I felt stronger.
It lifts a weight.
It lifts a weight. And I felt comfortable with my, when you're comfortable with your weakness and you recognize it and you're cognizant of it, there's a huge strength in that. And because I think it lends to the fact that you have strengths in other areas. So yeah, that was the first time I asked for help, and ever since then, asking for help is one of the most beautiful things. I think I do it daily. I have to.
We need to.
And ask you, like, have you ever had anyone ask you for help and you not liked it? No, we love it when people ask for our help.
That is my purpose.
Yet we're
that is what
terrified to
lights
ask
a
for
fire
it.
under me.
Right.
That is what gets me up in the morning. That's what, when I go to bed at night, I say, today mattered. What I did today mattered.
Yeah.
And I encourage people all the time. And then I emphasize to them when I tell them, if you ever need anything, call or text, whatever, I then clarify, I'm not just saying that.
Right.
Like, I genuinely mean that. So this is such a great example of, we don't have to be a therapist to help someone.
Right.
The housekeeping employee there, you said she was pushing a cart. I guess she worked for the hotel.
She was a housekeeper, worked for the hotel. Sorry, left that out.
Made that huge of an impact on you that you look back at that now. That story is what popped up in your mind that you wanted to share. And that's the person that made that big of an impact. Yeah. That's, again, I'm at risk of beating a dead horse here. I want to emphasize this. We all have the power to do that. Yeah. It's a matter of willingness and vulnerability. Yeah. If we show that door is open, there are people out there who never thought they could do it, who have changed people's lives for the better and have literally, truly saved people's lives.
Absolutely.
So I asked you a few minutes ago about what allowed you to speak up and ask for help and find vulnerability. In that same vein, what allowed you to overcome the trauma, the physical impact, and the addiction? You touched on the recovery community and that. We've talked about the passage of time. What else, what comes to mind first? What has allowed you to heal over time?
Oh, geez. That's a tough one to answer. The outdoors and athletics has been a big part of it. For me, I got into ultra running, which I kind of alluded to earlier. That was really good for my confidence. I lost most of my toes to frostbite. And so to learn how to run again and to prove to myself that I could do that was really confidence boosting. But honestly, Shane, it was time. It was, I don't think there's not a lot of people running around with no fingers, but every person we pass is dealing with something in their life. And because I had that Leave It to Beaver, childhood, I didn't realize that until I lost my fingers, that like everyone is hurting. Everyone in this world is hurting. And once I had these scars, I then opened my eyes to ask people how they're doing and really care how they're doing. And because of my vulnerability, as I mentioned, other people would share theirs. And you quickly realize every person around us is struggling with something. You just have no idea. And
some hide it better than others.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was really empowering to me. And I also began to look at what happened to me as a blessing because of that, of like, okay, Lord, I feel like I have tons of energy for helping people. You've given me, if I could this is probably like the best thing that could happen to me. If I want to help people, like you've given me hands of gold, I miss picking my nose probably more than anything, but it's a beautiful thing. Scars are a beautiful thing.
You mentioned your relationship with God. Is that something that your higher power has an impact on your recovery? And what does that look like for you? It might be hard to put something that immense, what does that connection look like? It might be hard to put that in words.
Yeah, I grew up in the Catholic world. But to be honest with you, it's funny. I went to Brophy. I went to a Jesuit college at Santa Clara. I don't think I really experienced Jesus or God until I went to an AA meeting or an NA meeting. And there's more Jesus going on there than you'll see in any church. So that was a huge part of it. I was never angry at God. I never looked at him as, why'd you do this to me? But I definitely was absent from him for a long time when I was high and hiding in drugs and hiding on the opioids.
Did you feel like you couldn't come to God? Because I know that with mine, my faith in Jesus Christ is like the foundation of my life, the foundation of my recovery. I just know that when I was caught up in the drinking and using, I was ashamed and I was afraid to go to him. And the very thing I should have done is go to him.
I'll start crying if I say it, but I felt so loved by him through this whole thing. I tear up. I've always felt that way. I see God everywhere. I see him in people. I see him in trees. I see him in the sun. I see him everywhere. And I can close my eyes, and I have had shame of like, God, I cannot believe I did this to I still can't believe I did this to my life. But I will feel this voice of like, Matt, I love you so much, Get all teared up.
Take your time.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I still feel that way. And to me, it's everything for me too. Like you said, it's the core of your recovery. It's what, same here.
And that's another message that I hope to emphasize, not only in this episode, but through the show as a whole, that God loves them exactly as they are. Yeah. Again, it doesn't mean that some of us don't need to change certain behaviors. I most definitely did. But it is unconditional love. You are loved regardless. And I want people to know that, because so many people don't feel good enough. And there's so many people that feel like failures and I'm not worthy of love, whether they've told themselves that or that was programming from childhood that some adults said to them or things like that. Yeah. It is so crucial. So what do you look at as is there a recovery date that you celebrate? Is there a day that you started what you consider your recovery?
September 5th, 2018, I checked into Prescott House in Prescott, Arizona. And that place saved my life. I don't know if you've heard of Prescott House. It's a long-term treatment for men. And when you show up, they don't tell you when you're leaving. That's part of their deal, is they want you to fully,
be there
and surrender. And so most people are there for 6 months. It took me 12, and made some of the best friends I ever made in my whole life there, and learned more about myself there than I ever thought I would. And that was, have I had mix-ups since then? Absolutely. That was at the very end of my addiction there, when I was really struggling. I got into meth, I got into speed, I got into Adderall, all of that stuff. I had my slips with marijuana and some things like that. And I think that's hard for anyone in recovery. When you're in that room and you're living in the house, it's easy to be stone cold sober and go to meetings every day. It's hard when you get back to real life. You're traveling for business, you're at a social event, and someone hands you a glass of wine. I've never had a drinking problem. So it's like, can I do that? Can I have this drink or can I not? And that whole was a learning process for me. And, you probably know the answer. The answer is none of that's good for me. And I need to stay away from all of it. But marijuana was one of those things that was always tough for me, of like, can I do this or can I not do this? It's kind of what do they call it? California sober.
Yes.
And
that's a term now.
I had a lot of friends that were doing the California sober thing, and I can't do that. I tried it.
I can't either. I can't have a sip of alcohol. And see, I like that you mentioned that you have friends that are what's called Cali sober, California sober, and they're still your friends. You obviously choose not to use those things, but here's what I like. One of the things I love about recovery, I don't get to decide what recovery looks like for anyone else.
Right.
I love that that's not my responsibility. Yeah. And my question is for people is, are you better today than you were yesterday? Right. That kind of sounds like recovery to me.
Right.
I know for me, I can't street drugs, prescription drugs, weed, alcohol. Like I can't do any of that. Yeah. So back to something you said a moment ago. You were up there for 12 months. I want to highlight that because the industry standard for a long time was 30 days or 28 days. Like it became a cliche.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that people can't get better or can't make significant changes in that period of time. I've seen some people do it, but I know for the vast majority of us, we spent much longer than 28 days creating our addiction. Yeah. It's often going to take longer than 28 days to unlearn those unhealthy habits. Yep. And that's where I'm not only a fan of people who will go for 60 or 90 or 120 days or 12 months, like in your case. I'm a huge fan of sober living, and I'm a huge fan of aftercare. Yeah. At least going to meetings that are run by like a counselor after a while, and then certainly, doing the 12-step thing. Yeah.
Yep. Prescott House had a aftercare program. So I stayed up there for a whole nother 12 months after that, where you're out of the house, but it's like sober living. You meet in the morning, you meet with a bunch of men, men going through what you're going through. You have your sponsor, they have meeting requirements. I think I did 2 meetings a day for basically 2 years. And that we haven't really talked about AA or 12-step, but yeah, I wasn't a big believer in all that. And AA and 12-step is, I remember, I'll just say that the first meeting I went to, there's this old timer, and he told me this was like the 48th year he had been coming to meetings. And I remember I turned to my friend and I was like, John, I don't want to be coming here for 48 years. Like, am I that screwed up? I have to do this for 48 more years.
Just be here today.
He goes, Matt, do you not think that guy wants to be here? And that was when the light bulb went off for me, it wasn't it was seeing how these people were living and their smiles that were in this AA meeting that made me come back.
I want that.
Oh, they were so free, the joy, the love. And once I saw that, and that became my goal, was to get that. Yeah.
And that's so important. You talked about that, that peer-to-peer thing. It's people who have lived it. I'm a big believer in counseling. I'm a big believer in therapy. But I also think that there's a power that regardless of what degrees you may have or accreditation from the state, when you can tell someone, oh, I did that same thing. Yeah. I lived that. I've been there. I know what that withdrawal feels like. Yeah. You talk about, with your hands, the walls come down with people and they feel like they can talk to you. Totally. When people hear that you've been there and you've lived that, they're like, oh, this person gets it.
Yeah.
They're going to be empathetic and they're not going to judge me.
Yeah.
And so this is a perfect setup for the next question. What are all the biggest lessons you've learned from all of this experience?
Oh my gosh. What are the biggest lessons I've learned from all this experience? One is, we talked about already, just the power of vulnerability, of just the power of sharing yourself with other people, and how important that is, not just for their well-being, but your own well-being. But what else? Life is hard. I never thought in a million years I'd be telling people I'm an addict. And I didn't have coffee, I don't think, till I was out of college. And life is hard, you especially in this world we live in today. I mean, it's to your point earlier, you can't share emotions. There are so many things that when you're younger, you don't think are scary, tough situations, that until you get older and you get in the middle of them, you realize, and if you have this crutch that you can take to make something a little bit better, it's extraordinarily dangerous. And, so I'm rambling, Shane. That's a really tough question. I don't know if I'm answering that. But,
no, you did answer it. I like the answer that realizing that life is tough.
Yeah.
There are some days things are going to suck. There are some days that are not going to be the greatest day. Yeah. But it's important to teach ourselves, well, I can live through this and not have to do these things that are going to harm me, or my behavior is then going to harm other people when I'm under the influence of it. Yeah. I don't think that's rambling. I think that's a really good point. And that goes back to what we said earlier about you when you talked about the degloving, the hand injury as a freshman, learning from failures too. Or difficulties or setbacks. Yeah. I think it's so important. And that's a big parenting moment now in this era of parenting. There's a lot of parents that want to bubble wrap life for their kids. Yeah. Now, grave danger and significant bodily harm and death, I think it's reasonable to protect them from those things. But I think it's important to let them go out there and get some bumps and some bruises and some scrapes and to make mistakes and learn how to come back from those things. Because when they're out there in the world, as you said, life is tough.
100%. I don't know what your parents were like. My parents, I just met your wonderful mom. My parents didn't talk about life. Like my dad never told me, about a problem he had or a broken heart he had. I never got that from my parents. And I look now at how I will parent my kids. You don't want to be their friend. Well, you do, but you know what I mean? You don't want to.
You want to be the parent first.
You want to be the parent first. Yep. But I remember, my folks think it's crazy. I tell my kids that I'm an addict. I have no problem sharing that. Like it's the thing I'm proudest of, that I overcame that, and they're going to deal with it too. And
they know that you have real information.
Yeah,
you can tell them again. It's not, I read this in a book that this is dangerous. Oh, well, I can tell you firsthand what that path is like.
Yeah.
I think it's that transparency with your kids is so important. So my parents were pretty good about having conversations with me. I am making a point to be even better with my daughter. I set the stage ages ago. You can come talk to me about anything at any time, even if you've messed up royally. Come talk to me. I want to know. Yeah. And, the time she has come to me and I'm like, I've made a mistake. I'm like, I'm so proud that you came to talk to me.
Right.
Doesn't mean that there's never accountability or there's not structure or there aren't consequences sometimes. But the first words out of my mouth are, I'm so proud of you for coming to talk to me. And then, like you, with your kids, the transparency. My daughter's 12. She'll be 13 later this year. She knows my story. And I told her very early on, I will tell you firsthand why alcohol is not worth messing with, especially when you're a preteen or a teen. You know, why you don't want to get into these unhealthy behaviors and things like that. And if we have those conversations early, we have them often, we have them proactively, and we have them in a very matter-of-fact way where we don't get weird about uncomfortable topics, it shows them, oh, I can come talk to you about this then. It reminds me of like talking about sex, you know, explaining to your kids how the birds and the bees work. If you get all squirmy and like weird about it, they start to think, oh, it's bad that I had a question about this. My daughter comes to me with all kinds of stuff, and I'm like, cool, let's talk about it. And it's afterwards, she's like, I'm so glad that I know that I can do this.
Yeah. I don't know. I see this in our kids. Insecurity, especially for girls, young girls, you know, with social media. And that's like one of the most important things for me, the mission to get across is I want them to know that I'm insecure. Like we're all insecure at some moment in our life. And it's just there's never been with the phone and technology, there's never been an easier way to get a hit of like dopamine of I'm okay. Or look, you know, they think I'm cute by giving me a like. And it's such a dangerous trap. And so I try to be really open with the kids about that type of stuff. And because we're all susceptible to it, and it's everywhere, and it's you know, the worst it's ever been.
That's a perfect opening for me to recommend a book to the parents listening. It's called The Anxious Generation, and it's about kids that have grown up with technology who are having a digital childhood, and they're losing a play-based childhood. And a lot of what you were said, we're so glad that we grew up with what we grew up with. And talking about, you know, young girls and that comparison. Not thinking about the fact that these perfect looking people that they're seeing, these are airbrushed, these are photoshopped, there's filters put on them. These people are showing you their highlight reel. Behind the scenes, they have the same fears and failures and doubts that you do, but when you're 11, 12, 15, whatever, you're not thinking about that. You're like, I have to look like this.
Yeah. I was at Sky Harbor coming home from a business trip, and you know how they have in the main corridor, there's these big glass windows that separate the restaurants from... And I'm sitting here eating, and there's a girl, she must have been 13 or 14. She was traveling for folks, and I can see her on her phone. And I'm literally watching her take a picture of herself, and she has some app that can make her hips shrink in. And I'm watching her do this and then post this picture, and I can watch her get giddy and joy. And you know, I felt like crying. You know, and that kind of behavior exists everywhere with kids, and it's terrifying.
That desire also to look a certain way and be a certain weight, the door opening for body image issues and for eating disorders, it's the increase that we've seen with young women and with men. It happens to boys too. With the rise of social media, there's been a bump in that. You know, now often for young men, some of them it is, I need to lose weight, and it does end up manifesting as bulimia or anorexia or whatever. But as you probably know as a young guy, the body image issue is often, I don't have enough muscle. And you get these 18-year-old boys whose testosterone, natural testosterone, is at the highest level it's going to be, and they're taking steroids or they're taking pro-hormones or steroid precursors. And it ties into what they're seeing there on social media. And that's why it's so important for your kids that have a dad that's like, I am vulnerable. I am not perfect. I am an addict. I do have flaws. And you know what? That's totally fine, because every single one of us does. There is no perfect out there. You know, there was one perfect person that ever existed on the planet, and he ain't me. So what's your life like now? You've mentioned getting married. You've mentioned kids. What's your life like now? What are you doing? And you've already answered some of this with the experience, the strength, the knowledge that you've gained as a result.
So I'm getting married. I am marrying Sarah's a beautiful firefighter for the city of Queen Creek. So I married an athletic girl. She has two beautiful kids, 12 and 14. And for work though, I'm more or less a consultant to financial advisors. So I travel quite a bit, and my job is, these advisors are entrepreneurs, and it's just helping them grow their business and really run a better business. And this is where I guess my story can be an avenue for me. Is I really believe your business, especially if you're an entrepreneur, your business will only ever be as good as you are personally. It's really true. And so if I can help these people be better human beings in some way, it's just going to help them be better business, especially when you're talking finances and you're talking investments of people. You need to be, authenticity is a pretty important thing, and being trustworthy. But Shane, I still am looking for what I'm supposed to be doing, to be honest with you. Like I get a lot of, I host an AA meeting on Sunday mornings. It's a part of a men's group that I was up in Prescott. I'm involved in some communities like that, but I feel like there's a lot more I could be doing still as far as helping others to, we talked about it when I first sat down. Like I don't need to be paid. You could send me to some Central Phoenix and have me knock on doors looking for, men to talk to and help. And I would have energy for days doing that.
Oh, I've noticed that.
And it's, I'm not saying I'm good at it. I just have energy for days for that. And so I'm still looking for answers, I guess, is where I'm at. I would love to own my own business someday. And
would you be willing, are you comfortable sharing your story? I mean, obviously you're doing it right now, but like if somebody asked you to come speak,
I do that often.
You already do that.
Yeah, I do. So I do have a website. I don't know if you
let them know what the website is.
Sure. You can go to, it's claritylifestylecompany.com, clarity with a K. And it was a side project I actually started when I was at Prescott House. I started a landing page. People started to ask me for work, actually. Would you come, instead of having someone come talk about annuities and life insurance, could you come tell your story? And so I started doing that for advisors. And that slowly evolved into, hey, I volunteer at this house down the street. Could you come talk to these men? I wish I did more of it. I love writing. You'll see I have a blog on there that I write about a lot of issues that I think men can relate to. And so interested checking that out, go for it. But I just wish there's more to come. And I'm just the tip of the iceberg right now.
There is more to come. It's not, I wish there was more. There is more to come.
Absolutely.
With who you are, the way you have your life lined up right now, your connection with your higher power, the experience you have, the strengths that you have, the abilities that you have, the passion that you have, that's going to all coalesce into more. It's not even a question. It's a matter of when.
Well, I hope so. Thank you. That's my hope.
So you mentioned, what was the website one more time, and we'll put it down in the description of the podcast as well. Great. One more time.
It's Clarity with a K, Clarity Lifestyle Company, one word, claritylifestylecompany.com.
And so they can if someone wants to reach out to you, they can do it through the website?
Yeah, you can reach out to me through the website. There's some links there to articles, and I think the Arizona Republic piece that you first saw, and some other things. I'll probably have a link to this when this is up someday on there too. You can find everything there.
And this will be up June 18th. So it's going to very, very soon. A couple more questions for you. What would your message be to people prescribed opioid painkillers as a result of an injury or surgery? Any advice? Because, I'm as someone who I myself had an opioid addiction. I obviously I don't take them anymore, and I would advise caution to people, but I also recognize that there are people out there that, there are people that have significant injuries that I would not tell them, you have to grit it through this without taking this. But I think that it's important to hear input from people who did receive them for legitimate medical reasons, such as yourself, and it opened that door for them. What would your input be to people that are currently taking those? Is it just a matter of use caution, or what would your advice be?
Find a buddy, someone that can help you take these medications. Coming through a pain med and I would be very blunt about the withdrawal of getting off pain meds. Getting off pain meds is I don't wish that upon anyone. It is the most god-awful experience. It takes you to a level of depression and sadness that is unspeakable. So I think people need to be aware of that. I had my wisdom teeth pulled a couple months ago, and I didn't take pain meds. I took ibuprofen, ironically, and I thought the ibuprofen worked just as good. I'm not saying that there's times when pain meds are needed, but be careful. They were given to me as a this is a medical thing. This is what you do, and I was in a vulnerable place too. I took their advice and followed suit. But I wish someone would have told me a little bit. Or I wish I would have had someone there to tell me the big picture of this isn't the only way. There's repercussions to this. You're gonna experience. Getting off of this is not easy, and so
the withdrawals.
So I just think for me, it would be find someone that you trust and who loves you, who can facilitate that for you and oversee your medication.
That's such a good answer. Like if you have a spouse or a roommate or a family member to hold them for you when it's time for that next dose,
Yes.
give it to you, because it happens in a very sneaky way.
So sneaky.
It goes from, okay, I'm supposed to take one every 4 to 6 hours. What if I take 1.5 every 4 to 6 hours? What if I take 2 every 2 hours? It's like a stair step. It's one step at a time. And one day you wake up and you realize, wow, when I run out, I start feeling exactly what you described. Opioid withdrawals are hellish.
Yep.
They are unlike anything else I've ever experienced. The pins and needles, feeling everything hurts, everything sucks, everything's awful. So that is so good. Like along with mine, just use caution. I like that you gave something tangible. Have someone that is making sure you are taking them as they are prescribed. So another piece of advice I'd like to ask you about. What would your words be to those out there who are presently fighting battles, whether it be physical obstacles, injuries, or addiction?
What would my word of advice be to people who are in the middle of a battle?
With anything.
First, recognize that what you're going through, you're not unusual. You're not, there's nothing to be ashamed of, whatever you're going through. It's very normal. I think it goes back to my finding a buddy, though. It's surrounding yourself with people that you can be vulnerable and tell your story to, and what you're experiencing and what you're feeling. And listen, if you tell that someone those inner feelings and they react in a way that is unfair, they're not a good friend. And I'll be the first to tell you that's not going to happen. People are dying to be there for you and want to love and help you. But I guess it's just don't sit around and think you can't ask for help. There's a lot of people out there that are afraid to ask for help because of, especially in, the pain med world, white collar, I'm an investment advisor. Like you can't do pain meds. You can't tell people that stuff. And, you can. And I just find a group of men that you can be open with, share everything that's going on.
Don't fight your battles alone. That's so important.
Much better said. Yes, exactly.
And that finding support and speaking up. I know I've already said this several times, and I'm going to say this several times every episode, but it's so important to emphasize. It bears repeating. Very few problems in life, if any, do we solve by not talking about them.
Right.
The moment that we get those words out, I need help, that is when healing can begin. That is when the weight starts to be lifted. Now, that's just the beginning of the work, but that is the beginning of a new chapter. Yep. Matt, it's very obvious to me, and hopefully it's very obvious to everyone listening, why I wanted no one else but you for my first episode.
Thank you.
So before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to add or anything I may have overlooked?
Oh gosh, you keep putting these tough questions right on the.
That's a pretty wide open one there too.
No, it's just if you're not smiling, you're doing it wrong. Be gritted, have GRITitude, because you know what? Like whatever you're going through, the obstacle's the way. You get through whatever you're going through. It's going to teach you. It's going to mold you. It's going to grow you. So there's tough things, but accept them with open arms and charge forward and just keep moving. Yeah.
Our guest today has been Matt Miller. Matt, thank you so much for sharing your time with us here on Silverladder.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks once again to our guest, and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it on social media and with your personal network. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, or would like to suggest a guest or topic for a future episode, please email us at podcast@silverladder.com. If you need resources related to mental health support or treatment, please visit silverladder.com and select Resources from the toolbar menu. And finally, if you have questions about or are interested in setting up a presentation, consulting, peer support, or family support services, please email contact@silverladder.com. Please note that Silverladder is not a crisis resource and is not staffed or monitored 24/7. Thank you for listening to Silverladder.